All right, Rabbi, guten Chodesh. We won't be able to finish the entire DAF today. Sabach il-Khir Chodesh Tov. We won't be able to finish the whole DAF today because we only had a half an hour at the earlier DAF, but we'll do most of it. Tez Zayin Amud Aleph, we're at the fourth line. The entire DAF today is about the principle of nidoi and other different kinds of banning of an individual for misbehavior. Nidoi, we saw, was placed upon an individual if he is recalcitrant and refuses to submit to the authority of the Beis Din. We'll also see that nidoi can be placed upon a person if a grave insult is lodged against a Torah scholar, that the individual who made the insult can be placed under nidoi. We'll also see that there's another type of ban which is more stringent than nidoi. It's called cherem, which is if a person digs his heels in and doubles down on his recalcitrance, eventually will not only put him under nidoi, we'll put him under cherem, which requires us to distance ourselves even more from him and to ostracize him even further. There's a more lenient form of nidoi, which is called nazifa. And nazifa is if a person only mildly insults a scholar or slights him in some way, so then that person goes under nazifa, which we'll see all these. So just keep in mind these three terms: nidoi, cherem, and nazifa. Okay, the primary focus is on nidoi because that's mentioned in our Mishnah, but we have the more stringent called cherem and the less stringent called nazifa. Okay, so let's go on. Amar Rava. Bach changes the girsa, but we'll read it as it is. Minolan de mishadrin shlicha de veidina umizamninan leiledina. How do we know that we're supposed to send a proxy to a person who has been summoned to Beis Din, and that we send it in order to summon him? Because we know with the whole story of the insurrection with Korach and Dasan and Aviram, that Moshe sends a dispatch to tell Dasan and Aviram that they've been summoned. And how do you know that the dispatcher, the dispatchee, is supposed to bring a summons with him? Vayomer Moshe el Korach ato v'chol adasecha. That Moshe says to Korach, you and your entire congregation are hereby summoned. So therefore, in other words, I think the second question is, even if you're not dispatching someone, even if you're speaking to the person, you have to tell them explicitly, you are hereby summoned to Beis Din. And Lakame Gaver Rabba, and how do you know that when you summon the person, that you have to specify in the summons that he's going to be appearing before a great person, meaning a superior who's going to be hearing the case? Dichsiv lifnei Hashem, that it says that you Korach will appear before God. So Moshe specified the judge who was going to be presiding over the case. Atu planya. And how do you know that you have to name the two litigants? In other words, if there's a case of litigation of two parties, how do you know that both parties have to be named in the summons? Dichsiv ata v'hem ve'aharon. That when Moshe summoned him, he said, you and they, meaning the rest of your group, against Aharon. So you see, Aharon was also named as the other side of the dispute. He's the defendant. Aaron is, yes, you're right. Aaron is the plaintiff in this case. You're right. And the Kavinan Zimna, or it could be that Hashem was the plaintiff, it's not clear. The Kavinan Zimna, and how do you know that you have to specify a date for appearance in the summons? Dirsiv Machar, as Moshe said to Korach, tomorrow you need to appear. And Zimna Basar Zimna, how do you know that you have to repeat the summons? Meaning that if the accused ignores the original summons, how do you know that you have to send her a second hazmana? You have to repeat the hazmana. Dichsiv, because the pasuk in Yirmiyah says, Kar'u sham paro melech Mitzrayim sha'on ha'evir ha'moed, that they call in summons Paro melech Mitzrayim in judgment because of his crimes against the Jewish people. But it also says ha'evir ha'moed, that the allotted time has already passed. Which means that even though the allotted time for his summons has already passed and he has ignored it, we have to call him again. Now, how do you know that, let's say, the person who's being summoned, instead of complying, instead insults the shliach of the Beis Din, and he starts hurling insults at him and saying, I don't have to listen to you. How do you know that if the shliach Beis Din comes back and tells the Beis Din that the accused has insulted me, that he's not speaking Lashon Hara, that it's permitted for him to say that, and he doesn't have to worry about Lashon Hara? D'chsiv ha'inei ha'anashim ha'im tenaker. Because Dasan and Aviram responded to Moshe and said, do you think you're going to knock out our eyes? We're not coming. Meaning, don't think you can blind us to your crimes, Moshe. We're not coming to appear before you. And so you see from this, how did Moshe get back the word? It must be that the proxy that he had sent came back and told him exactly what Dasan and Aviram had said. In other words, you don't have to sugarcoat the insults that the accused hurls at the shliach when you bring it back to the judges. Tell them exactly what he had said so that we can know how to deal with him in the future. And how do you know that you put a person under nidoy if he's recalcitrant? Dichsiv oru meiroz. Because now we go to another section of Tanakh, which is Shiras Devora, the song that Deborah and Barak sang after they defeated Sisera in battle in Sefer Shoftim. And it's one of the psukim. It's a very poetic. It's a song. It's a poetry. We read it as one of the haftorahs, I think, in Parshas B'Shalach. Yeah. So just like B'Shalach has Az Yashir, we also have Shiras Devora. So one of the psukim says that Barak says, Oru Meiroz, cursed be Meiroz. So you see that this person whose name is Meiroz, because he failed to come to the Jewish people's aid, he was put under a ban. Dahachi Savara de Gavra Rabba, and how do you know that, like the way that Rashi explains, Das Ploni Shabolanados is Ploni, that how do you know that when you put the person under the ban, you have to specify the name of the great rabbi who is imposing the ban? You can't just tell him you're under nidoy, you have to tell him you're under nidoy by the authority of so-and-so. Diksiv Omar Malach Hashem. Because the next part of that pasuk says, how do I know, or under whose authority is Meiroz cursed? Under the authority of an angel of God. Uminolan de mecharminon, and how do you know that if a person digs in his heels and doubles down on his recalcitrance, that you put him in chayrim after his nidoy? Dichsiv oru, right? And because the word oru means you curse the person. And part of the curse, now when a person's under nidoy, he has to isolate himself. But it's not so bad that he cannot have any, it's not that we treat him like a leper that he can't communicate with anyone. It's just that he's not accepted. It's not clear. You have to go through the poskim to see exactly what the difference between nidoy and chayrim is. But the Gemara describes chayrim as being arur, da'achil v'shasi bahadei, v'koi ba'arba amos didei, that we curse anyone that eats or drinks with this person who's under chayrim, or who even comes within 4 cubits of him. Dichsiv yosheveha. And we know this because not only did Barak curse Meiroz, but he cursed anyone who sits within his vicinity in the pasuk. Uminolan de partinan chatoei b'tzibura. And how do we know that it is a mitzvah to specify the person's sins publicly? In other words, don't think you want to protect him. You have to let people know what he did. Dirsiv ki lo bo'u le'ezras Hashem. Now we go to another section of Tanakh. It's talking about people who neglected to come to Yerushalayim to build the Beis HaMikdash with Ezra. And it says those people who did not come to the courtyard of Hashem, I'm sorry. This is still part of the pasuk in Shoftim. This is still part of Shiras Devora. That this person Meiroz did not come to the aid of Hashem when the Jewish people needed help in fighting Sisera. This person did not come. Va'amar Ula b'dalad meya shipore shamte Barak leMeiroz. And Ula explained that this is what Barak said publicly, that he blew 400 shofars as a way of publicizing what was going on, and that's how he put Meiroz into chayrim, or under a ban. Now, it seems like not only was he put under nidoy, he was put under chayrim in this pasuk. Ika da amri gaver rabba hava, vika da amri kochva hava. Now, who was this Meiroz? Some say that he was a very powerful person in the region, and others say that it refers to a celestial, angelic being. Right? P'shenemar min shamayim nilchamu ha'koichavim. As we know that this war was not just waged down here on earth, but it was waged among the stars as well. And so Meroz represents a certain intelligence of a constellation which could have come to the Jewish people's aid to help them in their war, but neglected to do so. And how do you know that when a person's put under cherem, that you can even... Now this is not necessarily all the time. It's just saying that the BAYT has the authority to do this if they feel that it's an appropriate measure to take, that you can even take a person's assets and make them hefker, divest him, strip him of his assets. This is a pasuk in Ezra, right? This is what I got confused. It said that anyone who does not come within the next 3 days to help us build the temple, so his property will be despoiled. In other words, we'll divest him of all of his property, and he will be separated from the congregation of the diaspora. So you see that putting a person under ban can also be accompanied with divesting him of his property. Uminolan denatzinon velaitinon umachinon v'talshinon seyar umashbi'inon. And how do you know that we can do other acts of public humiliation? We can yell at him, we can curse him, we can even strike him, we can pull out his hair, and we can swear terrible things in his name. Dichsiv, how do you know this? Ve'ariv imam va'akalalein va'akeh mehem anoshim va'emartem ve'ashbi'em belokim. That Nehemiah here is making a vow against intermarriage, and he's calling upon all the people that intermarry, that he will do all of these terrible things to them to publicly humiliate them. And he enumerates striking them, cursing them, pulling out their hair, and swearing negatively in their name. Uminalan dekaftinan ve'astrinan ve'avdinan hardafa. And how do you know that if a person is recalcitrant, that we could even tie his hands and feet together, or tie him to a flogging post, and even do something called hardafa, which is to pursue him. Dirsiv hein lamaves hein lishroshe hein le'anesh nichsin. That it says in Ezra that anyone who does not obey the word of Hashem, some will die, some will be uprooted, and some will have their assets punished. So, and to be tied up. My lishroshe, what does it mean to uproot? Amar Adamari, Amar Nechemiah bar Baruch, Amar Rivke bar Abin, Amar Rav Yehuda, hardafa. It means pursuit. So my hardafa, Amar Rav Yehuda bar Rav Shmuel, bar Shilas Mishmei Derav, So Amar Rav Yehuda, hardafa. So my hardafa, what is it? Amar Rav Yehuda bar Rav Shmuel, bar Shilas Mishmei Derav, minadin la'alter, v'shonen la'achar lamid, u'macharimin la'achar shishim. So they explain, I think this is their explanation of what hardafa is, that what we do is we immediately put him under a ban, and we also ban him a second time. So what it means is like this: a person who is basically placed under a ban is immediately placed under a ban for 30 days. That's called nidoi. Then, if he doesn't make good with the BAYT, then we put another ban of 30 days on him. If he still doesn't make good with the BAYT, after that 60-day period, then we put him into cherem, which is that deeper level of estrangement.
Are there more consequences?
Yeah, there are more consequences, like we saw before, that we curse anyone who comes in that person's vicinity.
Can't talk to him.
Yeah, can't talk to him, you can't eat with him, you can't even enter within his Dalet Amos. Amarle Rav Huna bar Chinina hachi Amar Rav Chisda masrin be'sheni v'chamishi v'sheni. So Rav Chisda has a different explanation, because he holds that you don't put a person under nidui immediately, but rather you warn him Monday, the following Thursday, the following Monday, and if he does not submit after that, then you put him into nidui. But hanimili lemamona avo la'afkirusa la'alter. That's only true when there's a financial dispute and the person refuses to submit to the judgment of the BAYT, then that he has to pay. But if a person is going to be put under nidui because he is insubordinate to a Talmud Chacham and says something untoward to a Talmud Chacham and he deserves nidui, then you don't give him that warning, you put him under nidui right away. And now let's illustrate it. Ahu tafcha di ispaker b'Rav Tuvi bar Masna. There was a certain butcher in town who insulted Rav Tuvi bar Masna. So imnu alei Abaye v'Rava v'shamtu. So Abaye and Rava came to the rescue, and they put this butcher under nidoi. L'sof azal paise lebaldine. So afterwards, the butcher had contrition, and he went ahead and asked mechila from Rav Tuvi. Amar Abaye hechi liavid lishri lei lochal shamta alei tlasin yomi. So lo lishrei lei kabo rabon and lameil. So they said, what are we supposed to do? This guy, it's within 30 days. To remove the ban, you can't remove the ban because it's been imposed for 30 days. That's inviolate. To not lift the ban, that's problematic because the Chachamim want to go to his butcher shop. They need meat. So business is business. So what are we supposed to do? So Amar Leila Ravidi bar Abin midish shemialach baha. So Abaye went to Ravidi and he says, do you have any solution? Amar Le Hachi Amar Rav Tachlifa bar Avimi Amar Shmuel tut asar v'tut sharei. So he said the same shofar blast, which put a person under nidoi, can also alleviate the person's nidoi. So go ahead, even though it's within 30 days, you can remove the nidoi. It's interesting that the word is toot for the shofar, because we say toot toot, right? It's the same toot, right? So Amar lei hani milu lemamona avola afkirusa ad dechai l'shamta alei tlas in yomin. So Abaye said that's not going to work because that's only true with financial disputes. If a guy makes good and listens to Beis Din, then you can remove the nidoi. But if he's insulted a Talmud Chacham, you can't lift it before 30 days. So the Gemara now says, based on that story, we can infer something else. Alma kesavar Abaya hani beitlas shamisu lo asu tlas achrine v'sharulei. So Abaye was concerned. He wanted himself to remove the nidoi. Why couldn't someone else remove the nidoi? Abaye must have clearly understood that because he, together with Rava, had imposed the nidoi, only he would have the authority to remove it. No one else is allowed to remove it. So di'iboyle, because this is actually a question. Hani beit tlasa de shamisu mahu lemeisei tlasa achrinu v'sharilei. The question was, if one Beis Din puts a nidoi on a person, can another Beis Din remove it? So tashma menuda l'rav menuda l'talmus. Let's look at the brisa. If a person is under a ban to the rabbi, to the teacher, then he's also under a ban to the student. Now, when it says that you're under a ban, again, these are vague terms, and the Gemara doesn't completely define them. But one of the things that we see from this brisa is that sometimes a person could be under limited nidoi, meaning that if a person's put under nidoi, it doesn't mean that he's got the cooties for the entire world. It's that he's precluded from a certain social group, a social enclave, right? So now we're going to define those parameters. If the Rebbe put a guy under nidoi, so then all the Bnei Yeshiva that are under the authority of that Rebbe, also this guy's under nidoi for everyone as well. But menuda l'talmid ain't a menuda l'rav. But if a lesser Talmud puts the guy under nidoi, then the Rebbe is not precluded from having contact with him. Menuda li'ira, menuda li'ira acheres, menuda li'ira acheres, ain't a menuda li'iro. If a person's under a ban by people of his city, then he's under ban wherever he goes. But if he goes out of town and acts foolishly, then when he comes back to his own city, he's not under nidoi for the people of his own city, just for the people of the city where he behaved that way. Menuda l'nasi, menuda l'chol Yisrael. Menuda l'chol Yisrael ain't a menuda l'nasi. In a similar vein, if the nasi puts him under a ban, then all the Jewish people under the authority of the nasi are also included in that ban against this guy. But if the Jewish community puts him under a ban, then he can go over their heads and have communication with the nasi. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Echad min ha-talmidim shenidav ha-meis, chelko eino mufar. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel now makes a statement, and he says if a student goes ahead and places a ban on a person, then the student who placed the ban dies, this person is still under nidoi. Don't think that it's immediately undone. So Shma Mina Tlas, you can infer three things from Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's statement. Shma Mina Talmud Shenida Lichvodo Niduyo Nidoi. The first thing that we can infer is that even though the Talmud placed the ban on this guy just because he personally was insulted, don't think that that's a light nidoi, just because it was imposed for personal reasons. No. Even though it was a personal affront, that nidoi is nevertheless a valid nidoi. And the way we know this is because don't call it the nidoi of a Talmud if the guy's being placed under a ban because of halachic violations. If it's a halachic violation that got him placed under nidoi, then don't call it nidoi Talmud, call it nidoi stam, because even the Rebbe would agree to that. The fact is that he insulted one of the Talmidim. It's got nothing to do with the teacher, and therefore that's why it's called nidoi of the Talmud. We also learn from here that the same person who imposed the ban has to be the person to remove the ban. And we also learn that another Beis Din does not have the authority to remove the ban. So in other words, the second teaching is that the person who placed it is the person who lechatchila has to remove it, and even b'di'evet, another Beis Din doesn't have the right to remove it.
Any person to put a ban on somebody else?
It's not clear who's vested with that authority, but it seems here, even if you're just a Talmud, as long as you're a Talmud Chacham, you have a right to place a nidui on someone. So we have stories in Jewish history of one party placing a ban, like Menachem ben Israel. Famous story about Menachem ben Israel. It was a fascinating period of Jewish history. That he appeared before a Beis and they placed him under a ban, and he said, "You can't put a ban on me. I put a ban on you." Right? And so you have stories like that. So Amar Ameimer Hilchasa Hani Beit Lasa Deshamisu Asu Beit Lasa Achrinu Visharulei. Ameimer seems to contradict this. He says the halacha is that if one Beis Din put a ban on someone, another Beis Din can remove the ban. So Amalei Ravashi La Meimar Vahatanya B'Shimon Gamliel Omer Echad Men HaTalmidim Shnida V'Ameis Chelko Einu Mufar. But what about the brisa that we just on? Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said that if a student places a ban, then another Beis Din does not have the right to take it off. So my lav Eino Mufar Klal. So because we had understood that if he dies, that student, then the ban still stays in place and it's not undone. So that implies that no one else can undo it. So lo adasu beitlas achrina v'sharli. No, you're misreading the brisa. It doesn't mean that no one else can undo it. It just means that don't think that it automatically flies off just because the guy is dead and therefore you don't have to worry about his honor anymore. No, the ban is in place until another Beis Din comes and removes it. So that's why. So it doesn't really contradict what Ameimer was saying.
Why does it go off when he comes back to his city? He was placed in the Chaim by another Beis Din in another city.
Yeah.
Why would it go off?
Because they only have jurisdiction over their locale. You're under a ban that you're isolated, you're ostracized from our community. But we can't ostracize you from your own community, right? A guy goes to Montreal and he starts speaking English in shul, right? So they ostracize him. They put him on, I don't know, whatever you do. I don't know whatever they do to violate the rules in Montreal.
He eats poutine.
Right? He eats poutine or whatever, right? He does something horrendous, right? So they put him under Chaim. But when he comes back to Toronto, he's only ostracized from the people of Montreal. He's not ostracized from the people of Toronto, so he can come back.
It's like in secular law. If you happen to flee from, if you broke a law here and you didn't get arrested, you get out of the country. They don't, you're not under the auspices of the foreign government.
All right,
unless it's
comparable. Yeah,
treaty.
yeah. Tana Rabban, ein nidoi pachos milamid yom, ve'ein nazifa pachos mizayin yom. That the Brisa now tells us that nidoi by definition, like we saw, is a 30-day. It's not less than 30 days. And now we're introduced to this new principle of nazifa, right? Which I told you is this lesser form of ban, which is sort of like a self-ostracization, that if you know that you've insulted a certain great person, you have to sort of distance yourself from him, and a minimum of 7 days. Even though this is just an illusion, it's just an illusion from the pasuk. When Miriam and Aaron spoke lashon hara, Miriam was given saras, and Hashem said to Moshe, that if a father spits in his daughter's eyes, she would be ashamed for 7 days. So you have to distance for 7 days. Amar Rav Chisda, nidoy shalanu ki nazifa shalahenu, nazifa ditu shiva v'sulo. So the Gemara now, or nazifa ditu shiva, period. So the Gemara says that our nidoy today is like their nazifa, meaning that because of the lowering of honor, that we don't put a person under formal nidoy if he insults a Talmud Chacham. We put him under nazifa. And their nazifa is 7 days, and so therefore our nidoy is 7 days today. Sefrek the Gemara Vesulo, that's it. Reb Shimon bar Rebbe, I'll show you that that Nidui today is 30 days, because look at the following story. Reb Shimon was the son of Rebbe, and Bar Kapara was a student of Rebbe, and they were studying Gemara together. Havayasvi v'kagarsi kash lushmaita. They came across a very difficult sugya. So Amalei Reb Shimon Bar Kapara davar zet sarach Rebbe. So Reb Shimon says to Bar Kapara, "Oi, we really need my father to help us understand the sugya." So Amalei Bar Kapara Reb Shimon, my Rebbe Omer b'davar zeh. So Bar Kapara said, "What do you think your father's going to tell us that we don't already know?" Meaning he didn't insult Rebbe, but he basically didn't show the proper reverence. He figured, listen, if we can't figure out, Rebbe's not going to be able to figure it out either. So that's not nice. And so Azal Amalei le'avuha ikpad. So Reb Shimon went back and told his father what Bar Kapara had said, and Rebbe got very upset. Now, Rashi is very bothered by this story, because what right did Reb Shimon have to speak to this rechilas? It's lashon hara. So you wouldn't be. What right would Reb Shimon have to go and repeat what Bar Kapara had said disparaging about his father? So Rashi says it was Mesiach Lefituma, that he didn't deliberately go and give the report to his father. It happened to come up, not deliberately against Bar Kapara. We were learning the sugya and it slipped out, right? It slipped out. So that's the only way to really understand it, says Rashi, because otherwise, it's what Reb Shimon at face value Reb Shimon did would be wrong. Okay, Asa Bar Kapara lis chazui. Later, at some point later, Bar Kapara comes to visit Rebbe. Like Rashi tells us, Rebbe used to take regular visitors because he was sick. He had a choyle me'ayim. He had intestinal disease, and so people used to come to Talmim used to come to visit him. So Amalei Bar Kapara eni ma kirecha me'olam. So Rebbe looks at Bar Kapara. He says, "I don't recognize you, Bar Kapara. Do I know you from somewhere?" So Yada denakat milsa b'daite noig nizivusa b'nafshei tlasin yomen. So Bar Kapara realized that Rebbe was basically telling him, "I don't want to see you," and he realized that he was estranged from Rebbe. So he placed himself under a ban of nazifa for 30 days. From this story, you see that nazifa is not 7 days. Nazifa is 30 days. Right. Right. You see that Nazifa is a sort of a self-imposed exile based upon the chastisement of a great Talmud Chacham. Shuv pam echad gazer Rebbe shelo yeshanu l'talmidim b'shuk. There was another story with Rebbe that he decreed, I don't want any of my students, I don't want any of Talmidei Chachamim to teach their students in the marketplace. There should no more be public teaching of Torah out in the streets. So my Dorash, what was his explanation? Because the pasuk says, "Chamukei yerechayach kemo chaloim," that the recesses of your thighs, the hidden parts of your thighs, are like beautiful jewelry. So my yerech b'seiser, af divrei Torah b'seiser, and he learned that this was applying to the words of Torah, that just like the thigh is hidden, so too the words of Torah should be hidden. And of course we know that there are different periods in Jewish history when Chazal say that when Torah is not being regarded preciously, then that's not the time to start tooting it out in the streets. Sometimes you teach Torah privately, sometimes you teach it publicly. This was a period where Rebbe felt that Torah should be only taught privately. So Yatza Rebbe Chia v'shana l'shnei b'nei Yechav bashuk l'Rav l'Rabba bar Chana. Rabbi Chia, who's his Talmud, goes ahead and teaches his two nephews out in the marketplace. Shama Rebbe Ikbid. Rebbe hears about this and he's upset with Rabbi Chia. How come you're not listening to my decree? Asa Rabbi Chia li's chazuye lei. Rabbi Chia then came to visit Rebbe sometime later. Amar lei, Aya, my kore lach b'chutz. That Aya was like a disparaging way of saying Chia. He said, "Someone's calling you outside. I hear someone calling you." So Yada denakat milsa b'daite noig nizivusa b'nafshei tlasin yomen. That he realized that Rebbe was upset with him, and he imposed upon himself a nazifa ban of 30 days. Now, b'yom tlasin shalach leita, hadar shalach leidelo leisei. So Rebbe on day 30 of the nazifa ban sent a messenger to Reb Chia saying, "Come." Then, right afterwards, he sent him another messenger saying, "Don't come." So, me'ikara ma'saver lebasof ma'saver. So, what was Rebbe thinking? Why did he first tell him to come and then tell him later on not to come? Meikara Savar Mixas Hayom Kekulo, Ulebasof Savar Lo Amrina Mixas Hayom Kekulo. So the answer is that Rebbe initially thought, just like when you're sitting Shiva, the morning of the 7th you get up, because we say a portion of the day is like the whole day. So he figured the same thing would be true about a ban of Nazifa. But then he said to himself, no, if it's estrangement and being distanced from a person, then it has to be the full 30 days. And that's why afterwards he sent a message telling him not to come. But Asa, L'sof Asa. But it turned out that on day 30, Rabbi Chia came to see him. So Amar Lei, Amai Asis. So Rabbi says, what are you doing here? Amar Lei, the Sholach Limar Delesi. Because I got your message that I should come. V'hashalchi lach delotesi. But I sent you another message not to come. So Amar Lei, Zera Isi v'Zelo Ro'isi. I only read the first message. I didn't get the second one. I didn't get that email, right? It went into my spam folder. Okay. So Kari Alei Biratzos Hashem Dar Chayish Kam Oivav Yashlim Ital. That he said, Rebbe said the pasuk that when Hashem loves a person, even his enemies will make peace with him. Which, in other words, the idea being is that obviously Hashem loves you, and therefore He wants all of your enemies to love you as well. And that's why Hashem arranged it, that you only saw my first message and not my second message. So my time Avid Marhachi. But let me ask you, Reb Chia, why did you disregard my edict and teach your two nephews in public? Amar Lei Dichsiv Chachmos B'achutz Tarona. Because the pasuk says that wisdom should be out in the streets. So Amar Lei Im Karisa Lo Shanisav Im Shanisa Lo Shilashtav Im Shilashta Lo Pirshulach. Rabbi said, Tisk Tisk. He says, if you learned the pasuk once, you didn't review it, and if you reviewed it, you didn't review it a third time, and if you did, then you never understood it. No one explained it to you properly to begin with, because Chachmos B'chutz Tarona Kidarava. He says what wisdom should be out in the streets means as follows: that when you study Torah privately inside, then your wisdom will eventually seep out to the outside. But it doesn't mean that you should publicly teach Torah. But what about the prophet Yeshaya, who says that I do not speak about Rosh, about the most important things hiddenly, in a hidden fashion. I'm supposed to speak about them publicly. Ahu b'yomei dekala, that's referring to the 2 months out of the year when all of the Talmidim convene in the yeshiva. Then you're supposed to join them all and study together in a large fanfare inside the yeshiva. But that's not talking about going out into the street and teaching Torah. So the question is, what does Rabbi Chia do with the pasuk about the Torah being compared to the inner thigh, which means it's supposed to be hidden? Why didn't Rabbi Chia reckon with that? So Muki la b'tzedakah v'gemilos chasadim. He says that's talking about doing acts of chesed. When you do acts of chesed, you're supposed to do it in a shashtil way. But learning Torah, teaching Torah, he felt that you should teach that publicly. But the Gemara, the point of these stories is Alma Nazifa ditu tlas in Yomin. We see that even being under Nazifa is a 30-day thing. How can you tell me it's only 7 days? So the Gemara answers, Nazivas nasi shiny. That's because Rebbe was imposing the ban. In other words, when you insult Rebbe, you have to be in Nazifa for 30 days. But if you insult a regular Talmud Chacham who's not the Nasi, 7 days is sufficient. Nazifa didan kamahavi chad yoma. And the Gemara says we've actually gone even lower than that. The honor these days is even less precious, and therefore if you do something to deprecate a Talmud Chacham, you're only under Nazifa for 1 day. I guess maybe in today's world it would be for about 5 minutes if we're going to go, right, because of the lowering of honor. Ki had deshmul mar ukva ki havuyas vigarsi shmaita havayasiv mar ukva kamei deshmul barichuk dalad amos v'chi havayas v'bedina havayasiv shmul kamei mar ukva barichuk dalad amos. And the following story illustrates that the two great sages Shmuel and Mar Ukva. And Mar Ukva was the Nasi, so to speak. It was the, even though they were in Bavel, it seems, but Mar Ukva was probably had some type of religious authority placed over him by the government, and therefore he presided over court cases. But Shmuel was the Rosh Yeshiva. He was the greater of the scholars. He was the greater scholar than Mar Ukva. So when it came to studying Torah that was not judicial in nature, so Shmuel was considered to be the master, and Mar Ukva, out of respect to him, distanced himself 4 amos from Shmuel. But when Mar Ukva was presiding over a court case, Shmuel, out of deference to him, would distance himself 4 amos from Mar Ukva. But at the same time, even though Mar Ukva would preside over a case and he was the superior because of his position, he made sure that he would always sit on a mat in the presence of Shmuel so that people should listen to Shmuel and realize that his words of Torah carry tremendous weight. Kol yoma hava malavi melei Mar Ukva l'Shmuel ad ushpize. Every day, to show respect to Shmuel, Mar Ukva, recognizing that Shmuel was his superior in Torah knowledge, would always escort him to his residence. Yom echad itrid bedine and hava azul Shmuel basrei kimata lebeise. So one day, Mar Ukva got stuck in court, didn't have the opportunity to escort Shmuel back to his house, and so Shmuel said, "All right, I'll go to Mar Ukva's house." Amrlei lo nagalach lishli limar betigre. So it's not enough that I had to come to you. Now, do I have to get permission from you to go home now? Like he was being sarcastic, Shmuel, when he got to Mar Ukva's house. So Mar Ukva was able to detect that Shmuel was a bit annoyed. So yada denakat milse bedaite nog nizivusa benafshe chad yoma. And because Mar Ukva realized that he had slighted Shmuel in some way, he placed himself under a voluntary Nazifa ban for one day. So this story illustrates that nowadays, in the times of the Gemara, Nazifa is only for a day. Hahi itza da habas yasva b'shavila habas pashta kara b'kaminat menifa chushloi v'havacholif v'azal tzurva merabanan v'lo ichna amikamei. That there was once a woman sitting by this in the street, or in the road, and she was her legs were strewn outwards so that she could sift some pearled barley, it seems like, and she was doing this out in the street. And a certain Talmud Chacham walks by her, and she just ignored him. She didn't either curtsy or show respect or maybe cover herself up. Whatever she was supposed to do, she didn't show humility before this Talmud Chacham. So Amar Kama Chatzifa Hahi Itza. He said, "What a chutzpahdik woman you are." She was very perturbed by this, and she went to Rav Nachman to find out whether was she put under a ban. So Amar La Mishama Shamta Mipume. So he asked her, did you hear him say the word Shamta? And she said, Amar Le Lo. No, I didn't hear him say those words. Amar La Zili Nahugi Nizifusa Chad Yoma Benafshich. So he said, fine. So you're not in Chayrim. Don't worry. He didn't put a nidui or a Chayrim on you, but rather you should just be estranged for one day. Have a nazifa for one day period. Make sure that you don't go out into the street for one day so that you don't encounter him again. Zutra Bartuvia Habakapasik Sidra Kameder Rav Yehuda, that this rabbi named Zutra Bartuvia, he would recite psukim in front of Rav Yehuda. Kimata lahai psuka ve'ela divrei David ha'achronim. He gets to the very end of Sefer Shmuel Beis, and it talks about the last will and testament, or the last words of David HaMelech. Yes? So we don't find the words Divrei David in all of Sefer Shmuel until that point. So Amar Le, so Zutra Bar Tuvia asks the valid question. He says, Achronim Mechlal Diikar Rishonim Rishonim Maininu. So he says, Rebbe, he turns to Rav Yehuda, he says, if it says these are the last words of David, where do we ever find that David said first words? In other words, where are his previous words? So Shasik Velo Amar Le Velo Midi. So Rav Yehuda just was silent and ignored him, didn't say anything. Hadar Amar Le Achronim Mechlal Diikar Rishonim Rishonim Maihi. So we don't know. Zutra was perplexed by Rav Yehuda's silence. So after a few moments, he repeated the question. So Amar Le, my daitach de lo yada pirusha da haikra lav gaver rabahu yada denakat milsa bedaite. I'm sorry, gaver rabahu. Period. Exclamation point. So Rav Yehuda says to them, "What do you think? I don't know how to explain what his earlier words were. What do you think I am? Chopped liver?" So the high krav, the high krav. You think I don't know the pshat? Lav gaver rabahu. Don't you realize that I know a lot and that I'm a chashav a yid? So why are you challenging me? So Zutra realizes that he's insulted Rav Yehuda. Yada denaket milsa b'daite nog nizivusa b'nafshei chad yoma, and so he put himself under nazifa for one day. So now the Gemara says, "Uda'asan Allah miha achronim michal dika rishonim rishonim mai." So the Gemara says, "But it's not a good question. Let's answer the question." In other words, if it says these are the last words of David, what were the earlier words of David? The answer is, "Vayidaber David laHashem es divrei hashira hazos b'yom hitzil Hashem oso mikaf kol oyevav u'mikaf shaul." That these are the words of David who sang this song on the day that Hashem saved him from his enemies and from the hand of Shaul. So Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu LeDavid, David, Shira ata omer al mapalaso shel Shaul. David, you're singing a song of praise for the downfall of King Saul. Ilmole ata Shaul v'hu David ibadati kama David mipanav. So he says, if the tables were turned, meaning that if you were Shaul and he was David, I would have killed many Davids to protect you, Shaul. In other words, the way Rashi explains it is, you know what, David, you needed to replace King Shaul because that was fate. That was your destiny. But had it not been that your destiny was to be the king of Israel, realize that Shaul was a groisa tzaddik. He was an amazing tzaddik. He didn't deserve to be wiped out. He needed to step aside because you were taking over as king. That's the destiny. That's the mazel, right? But if the tables were turned and he was the one that it was his destiny to take over from you, I would have wiped you out in a second because of his great righteousness. So don't. Why are you singing a song that Shaul has been overthrown? And that's why David, and this goes back to the original words of David, that he says shigayon leDavid. The word shigayon from the word error. That David says, I made an error. I acknowledge I made an error about singing to Hashem over the downfall of Cush, the son of Yemini. Now Shaul was the son of Yemini, so why are you calling him Cush? V'chi Cush shemo balo Shaul shemo. Elama Kushi meshuna ba'oro avshol meshuna b'maisav. That the Shaul was called a Kushi. A Kushi is a black person. That he was distinctive in his righteousness, just like a Kushi is distinctive in his appearance. Kayotze badavar ata omer alodos ha'isha hakushis asher lokach. So like it says, like Miriam spoke lashon hara about the Cushite woman that Moshe had married. V'chi kushis shema v'alo tzipor shema. Why are you calling her a Kushite? She was Tzipora. So elama kushis meshuna ba'ora av Tzipora meshuna b'ma'aseha. But rather it means that she was known as a Cushite in the pasuk because just like a Cushite woman is distinctive in her appearance, Tzipora was distinctive in her behavior. Kayotze badavar ata omer vayishma Eved melech hakushi. That it says that Eved, the king of Kushi, the servant who's the king of Kushi, hears this, and this is referring to Melech Tzidkiyahu. V'chi Kushi shema balo Tzidkiya shema. Elama Kushi meshuna ba'or av Tzidkiya meshuna b'maisav. It's to tell you, just like a Kushi is distinctive in his appearance, so too Tzidkiya was distinctive in his behavior. Kayotze badavar ata omer halo kivnei Kushiyim atem li b'nei Yisrael. We say this in one of our haftorahs. It's I think Achremos or Kedoshim. We say, "Behold, you are like the children of Cushites, O children of Israel." Why call us Kushim if we're the Yisraelim? But rather, just like the Jewish people, just like a Kushi is distinctive in his appearance through his skin color, so too the Jewish people are distinctive in their behavior and different from all other nations. And this is where we will hold it for today. You have a wonderful Chodesh Elul.